1962 World's Fair was for Seattle, the Space Needle became the tallest building in the skyline when it was built in 1962. In fact, at that time, it became the tallest building west of the Mississippi River. Before that, the tallest building in town, I'll point it out for you in a bit, was the Smith Tower, which was built in 1914. For those of you up on the top deck, you can see it. It's the building almost to the right of the rest of the skyline. It's a little beige building with a pyramid shape on top. Down below, for those of you that can't see it, we have a picture of the Smith Tower in 1913 being built. So that was built in 1913, and that remained the tallest building in our skyline until the Space Needle was built in 1962. Every building that you see taller than the Smith Tower, taller than the Space Needle, was built after 1962. The plan with the World's Fair in 1962 was to put Seattle back on the map, to stimulate the economy, and that's exactly what it did for Seattle. So mission accomplished for that one. There was also a hidden motive of the 62 World's Fair. And people thought this was a little bit wacky, but as you know, they've been coming up with wacky ideas throughout Seattle history. This is what they said. When they were deciding on the theme for the World's Fair, the fair planners said, what if we chose science and technology as the theme of our World's Fair? And then you get all these thousands of kids in the Seattle area going through the World's Fair. Maybe they will be inspired to take up science and technology as a career. Who knows? Maybe one will build a big technology company. You never know what can happen. The government gave us $10 million to put on this World's Fair. Not the only company started in Seattle. Off to our right-hand side, kind of almost behind us on the right, big brick building with a clock tower next to the white gantry cranes. In front of the big white gantry cranes, and then just to the left of those big white gantry cranes, you see a big square building with a clock tower, green siren on top, green-haired lady. That is the world headquarters of Starbucks. So Starbucks, of course, started here in Seattle. You can still go to the first Starbucks. It's at the Pike Place Market. You'll find it. It's the one with an enormous line coming down out of it, so anyone wants to go to the first Starbucks store. What about some other companies started in Seattle? See if you can guess who this might be. There was a young man named William who came to the first Seattle World's Fair in 1909 and saw the exhibit on the flying machine, where the man had a blimp kind of attached to a bicycle and he would pedal it around and fly. He'd crash a couple of times, but William here was inspired. He said, that's what I want to do. William Boeing, of course. Bill Boeing started out as a boat builder, and when he crashed his personal plane, decided he'd just fix it himself. Forget about waiting for these parts to come ship in from back east. Of course, Boeing Factory is another fun thing to do, and we have the Museum of Flight just south of town. What about this one? Early 1900s, two teenagers have a bicycle and decide they might as well put it to use making some money, and so they start delivering things on their bicycle. That'll be UPS, that's how they started. UPS started, two guys in a bicycle, and you can see one of the original UPS trucks at the Museum of History and Industry. It's a Model T. You know the story of John Nordstrom now, of course, went to the gold rush. What about this story? See if you can pick this out. Two middle schoolers decide that you're going to get it right away, decide that they really like working on computers, but there's no place to really work on them too well. So they go to the University of Washington and they ask the researchers there, hey, can we use your big computer lab? You guys are the only ones in town who have a computer. These things are huge. They need to be in an air-conditioned room. And they say, you know what, kids, we're kind of busy, but you're so interested, and we know your daddy's a big lawyer in town. Feel free to come in between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. That's when no one's using the computer lab, and you can come in and use it. And once you know, a few months after that, a big company needs some work done. They look at the logs for the researchers at the University of Washington, and they say, who are those guys who are working on that program between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m.? We want to hire them because they're the ones who know the language the best. They said, well, we got bad news for you. They're teenagers. We don't care. Send them over. We need them to work on it. That's how, of course, Bill Gates and Paul Allen got their first job in town, working on computers, doing the programming. We have a nice view of the Smith Tower now. Everyone has a nice view of that beige building with the little pyramid shape on top. Anyone know what special piece of furniture is in the Smith Tower? The wishing chair. Don't bring anyone on this in a second or third date. It will freak them out. But this chair is said to have magical powers. Any woman who sits in this chair within 1 year, she will be married. Now, it worked very well back then. I think that's because in the early days of Seattle, I think the ratio of men to women was 1 woman for every 12 or 13 men in Seattle. So I think that might have something to do with that. There was a man who got an idea to ship women from back east. He said, hey, anyone looking for a husband? Come on my boat, and I'm sailing over to Seattle, and we'll find y'all a husband. They made a sitcom, or I guess kind of a TV show about this. We played the theme song from it earlier. It's by Perry Como. Does anyone remember for a TV show about this situation? I'm going to play the Perry Como song one more time for you. Let's see if you can figure it out. This is the trivia section of the tour. This is a show about Asa Mercer, who got the wonderful idea to bring brides from back east and sail them to Seattle. Yeah, people kind of remember it. This is from a TV show called Here Come the Brides. It was in the 60s. This was the theme song for it. So real quick, pop culture for those of you who like it. Top Chef was filmed this last season in Seattle. One of their challenges was in the restaurant of the Space Needle. Dr. Meredith Grey, again, we said you can find her house over on Queen Anne Avenue or Queen Anne Hill. Her house is up there. Dr. Fraser Crane, if you want to see his actual apartment, go to the Museum of History and Industry, where they have a complete recreation of his apartment, right down to the old ratty striped chair and a little stuffed dog named Eddie right on it. They have wonderful exhibits there at the Museum of History and Industry. Just opened up last year, and this actually beginning of this year at South Lake Union, and you can really learn a lot more about the history. In fact, we worked in conjunction with them when we created this tour. They helped us out finding the photographs from the early days, and if you're really interested in the history, it's a really fun place. And of course, if you live in Seattle, the first Thursday of every month, the museums are free in town, so mark that on your calendar. Always fun to go to. Well, we hope you enjoyed this taste of Seattle history. It looks like the sun came out a little bit, so it should be nice for you making your way wherever you go here in Seattle. And as you look at the names of all our mountains and rivers and waters, and you look at the names of the streets, we hope you'll think of the early days of Seattle and how we got started. Thanks so much for coming out. Have a wonderful weekend.